Greetings everyone, Brett here with Hammerhead Model Making, back with another full build video. Now today we're going to be taking a look at the Italeri AH-6, commonly known as the Loach. Now if you've watched the recent video I did on the UH-1B, this is actually a companion for that one. I built them at the same time, and just like the other one, this will be built up in Honduran Air Force markings. And I have to apologize in advance because this video is not very long, and that's a twofold answer. One is it's just not a very big kit. In fact, it's like adorably small. And also there's a few areas where apparently I didn't film some certain parts, so I apologize. But we'll go ahead and jump into this one, and this is going to be a really straightforward and pretty quick build here. So we're gonna go ahead and start with by removing the parts. You can see there's only two main sprues of parts and then a sprue of clear parts, and there are a few different weapon options in the kit, and so you do get a few extra parts, but really it's pretty straightforward. I think I mean the kit overall is okay. The fit's not great. All the details are raised, and it's designed to be displayed with like the doors open, for example. So you have the doors open on the left side of the helicopter, and if you were to try and close them, you'd have to do a lot of sanding and filling and rescribing because they just don't fit in the closed position. And I mean, it would literally be like 50% of your work on this kit would just be trying to get those doors closed. So in the end, the commissioner of this project and I decided that we would just do the doors open, and as such I would have to add a little bit of detail. The actual interior detail isn't awful. I mean, I think everything that's in there should be in there, but it is lacking a few little details, and I had to make a few slight changes for this to be more accurate to a Honduran Air Force AH-6, and so you'll see those in a little bit. But the basic assembly of the interior goes together rather straightforward and quite well. You do get all your flight controls, instrument panel, seats. You do not get seats in the back because as the way it was configured for the kit for like a US Vietnam type aircraft, it didn't have seats in the back. It would have stowage for, I believe, ammunition or like extra rockets or something. But for the Honduran Air Force, we needed to add seats in the back. I ended up adding seat belts, and then the instrument panel was completely different on the Honduran Air Force version than it is on the US version. So you'll see some of that scratch building there. But going through, adding all the normal flight control pieces, and it's really fun. This kit was fun just because it was so small, and probably one of the smallest kits that I've done on the channel, I think, up to this point. I mean, some of the World War II fighters I've done are pretty small, but this one's tiny. So here I'm just adding a little bit of plastic just to kind of cover some of these open bare spots that wouldn't necessarily be typical on the actual aircraft. And these little panels I'm putting on here, there's actually like little, essentially like pockets on the back side of this bulkhead. So that's kind of what I'm trying to represent there. And then here's the back bench seat that I built up just basically out of a couple pieces of plastic, nothing fancy, and get that glued on. And then get the back rests put on. So these just basically go up against the back bulkhead there. And so yeah, and that's really kind of the extent of the scratch building for this part. Pretty simple. These will get painted up like cushions, and I think they'll look the part. For the seat belts, I am just using this extremely thin Tamiya tape. I want to say this is like 1.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters. It's very, very small. And so just, I am using a little bit of super glue on here. I've found in the past that I thought I could get away with just using the adhesive portion of the tape to keep it on there, but in time it always ends up pulling up. So I do use a little bit of super glue just to secure those on there so that they won't move in the future. And they look the part. There's also a few little details I need to add inside of the canopy. there's this like center brace thing, and normally you'd see like the pilots when hang their their headsets on there, things like that. And then there's a what I believe is a magnetic compass also sits in the front frame of the of the canopy, so I'll get that added in as well. But I'm just making sure this part gets added in. You have to be really careful when using the Tamiya extra thin on the clear parts, because you don't want it to run into the actual clear part, because then it just becomes a pain to clean and polish out. So here's that little compass I was telling you about. So the instrument panel in the kit it would be correct for like a U.S. version of the helicopter, but the Honduran Air Force used a much narrower instrument panel, and so basically what I'm doing here is to build up what I need for the instrument panel. Is I'm just cutting out certain specific shapes out of plastic, and then essentially laminating and the additional parts on to create this curved surface. And that will eventually be the basis for my instrument panel. Then I can go in and add details once this all secures. I debated whether or not I should use super glue or model cement, and in the end I chose to do model cement just because of the increased strength that I think it provides over super glue, because it's actually bonding the plastic, melting the plastic together, as opposed to just like sticking two surfaces together. So once it's dry, we can use our file here to kind of clean up our edges and make sure everything's nice and square. And then what I'm doing here is using different diameters of plastic rod and essentially like slicing off small slices that will act as my instrument faces here. And I'm loosely basing this off of the actual thing. I did have some decent pictures of what the Honduran Air Force instrument panels looked like, but at this scale, if I can get close, then I'm happy. I'm not trying to like replicate everything, exact down to every single instrument. Mainly just because it's so small, it is a little difficult to see everything in there. So as long as I'm getting close, I'm feeling happy about it, and because it'll give me the accurate overall shape of the instrument panel versus the US version, then that's definitely what I'm going for there. So fun little bits of scratch building here. And then finally we have to add, there's kind of like a little hood that goes around it, and so we'll go ahead and get that on there. For this, I am using super glue to kind of start it and tack it in, and then I come back in with the model cement to really solidify it. So just because this had some pretty tight bends, and I was just a little concerned that the plastic might break if I started off with the cement, because the cement will soften the plastic, and I didn't want those corners to break. So that's why I'm using the super glue at this particular moment. And then once it's on there, then I feel a little more comfortable using the model cement. So that's kind of how it's going to fit onto the floor. So we can go ahead and get that on there. And then here's kind of like the whole cockpit area dry fit together, and quite pleased with how it's looking. So now we can go ahead and start getting everything ready for paint and go ahead and get that started. Here's just some final pictures of the completed components all put together. And it would have been a challenge trying to get some like pilot figures in here just because it's so small. So for the interior, we're just going to use some Tamiya NATO Black here as our base. I'm not worrying about throwing a primer on this just because I know that A, I'm not going to be doing any masking over it, and B, that I would just be doing the NATO Black over the black primer anyways. So that's one area that I can eliminate a step that I don't need. And then for the sidewalls, we're doing some buff here, Tamiya buff, and the bulkheads. Now there's plenty of different colors that the AH-6s had on the interior. So, if you're doing one, definitely consult your reference pictures, but I have some good pictures from the Honduran Air Force AH-6s that, clearly had the black floor and the tan walls and bulkheads. So now I'm just going to give everything a light dry brush with kind of like a medium gray. This will just help highlight some of those details and just provide a little texture. It also kind of gives it like a dusty, worn look as well. So, it kind of acts as like a weathering effect as well. And now I'm going to pick out some of the other details in more of a traditional, just like straight black. This will just help create a little bit of contrast between the NATO black and some of those other parts. Just create a little bit of visual interest for the interior that will hopefully pop out a little bit when viewing through the clear parts. At this point, so I'm hand painting the interior details, but you might notice that I added a little bit of tint to the very uppermost portion of the canopy, and I did that using some Tamiya smoke. It's kind of like a clear, one of Tamiya's clear paints there. And so we'll go ahead and also doing on the inside, we're painting over or where the nose light would be, so that when we mask it off and do our exterior painting, it will show through the clear part. Now we can paint up the seat belts, the harnesses, and a lot of the other interior details. I mean, there's not really a lot. It's just the seats and the seat belts basically, and the controls, but that's about it. Now I definitely could have gone even further with the detailing in this, but again, it's so small and it's hard to work at that. I mean, 1/48 scale for me is hard enough to do scratch building, but at 1/72 scale, it becomes a real challenge. So I'm happy with what we got. So at this point, the painting's done, so we can go ahead and get everything assembled and put together and kind of give a test fit on how everything is going to look. Right, so with the interior done, we can go ahead and move on to building up the exterior portion of the kit. But first I need to get the cat out of the way, because he always likes to come up and inspect what I'm doing, even while I'm trying to film. But moving on. So the clear parts are actually probably one of the nicer parts about the kit. Well, most of the clear parts, I should say. That they actually, the fit is very, like, there's no, it's not like it's going onto a lip or anything. Like, it's very much like you push the clear part into the opening and hope that it will fit right. I didn't have to do a lot of trimming to get it to sit in there, but some areas, the tolerances were a little iffy in some of the areas, so care must be taken when installing the clear parts and gluing them. There's two little windows that sit up above on top of the fuselage. Those ones did not fit at all. In fact, I had a lot of trouble with those, and you'll see it a little bit later on. But for the most part, the rest of the clear parts fit okay, and they're pretty clear and thin. So minor props to Italeri. And now this is an old kit. I don't want you to sound like I'm dogging on this kit, but I mean it is an older kit. It's been around for a while, so. But we can get the exhaust installed here. And yeah, you can see I've also painted in the upper housing, the transmission, or I think it's the transmission housing up there on top of the fuselage. And so now I'm getting ready to install the cockpit into the fuselage. And for this, I am using super glue. And now, when I installed this, I was aligning the bulkheads up with the walls, and you can see here that by doing that, I actually misaligned the floor, and the floor sits up really high. And so that was a mistake, and apparently pulling the part out completely shattered it. But I got it put back together. I got it aligned correctly using the other side of the fuselage, and I was able to get this all put together. And fit here was okay. I mean, I was a little concerned with all the plastic going into the fuselage, that I would have, some seam issues, but in reality, it wasn't terrible. I was able to get the fuselage together with very little fuss. And one of the nice things about this fuselage and the fact that the few details that are on the fuselage are raised details is it actually made cleaning up, like the seams, pretty easy and quick, because I didn't really have a lot of detail that I had to restore. So I've gone ahead and cleaned up the seam lines off camera here. And I mean, I really didn't need a lot of actual filler, just sanding and polishing, and that's about it to get that done. Now we can install the landing skids, and like a lot of other parts on this kit, like there's no positive way to align the parts. Like these are literally just butt joints. Like you just glue one end against the other and hope that you're getting it aligned correctly and in the correct position. So kind of kind of a pain, because I mean, if this was a bigger kit, you'd have to worry about the weight of the kit. Would it break this joint? Things like that, possibly pinning it. This thing is so small that, I mean, it weighs virtually nothing, that I don't think it's going to be a problem. Another issue here with the main rotor is you have to install all the blades independently into the hub, and the connection point was so small that this really caused troubles. And because this is a commission build, and I'd have to be sending this all the way from the U.S. to Honduras. In the end, I decided that it would be better to have the blades unattached during shipping, because I knew that they were going to break anyways. And so I have it glued here, but just note that it actually was very fragile and was really kind of a pain to deal with. So now we can get the main canopy installed, and again, fit here was not terrible. There's a little bit of a gap at the top there that has to get filled in with a little bit of plastic putty, but otherwise the rest of the fit was pretty good all around, and I didn't really have any issues. So I was able to get that glued in. Again, you have to be really careful using the extra thin cement around the clear parts, because you don't want it to accidentally wick under your finger or something, and then you just end up with a nasty fingerprint on your clear parts, which is never good. And funny thing about the clear parts is, I actually, the two little windows up on the top, I actually ended up forgetting to mask those, and they got painted over. So yeah, that was kind of a gaffe on my part. But now we can get the tail boom all situated, and again, parts here, like there's no alignment like pins and holes. It's just you glue one part to the next and hope that you get it in the right spot. So here we are. The helicopter's all built and ready for paint. Just have to do a little bit of scratch building here. So one of the interesting things about the Honduran Air Force AH-6s is that their method for attaching the rocket pods was different from the US version. The US version had these large, like, single boom, they almost look like little mini wings that would come out the side from the doors, and then the rocket pods would get attached to that. And you had like the Stinger pods, and then just the 5-inch rocket pods, or the 3-inch rocket pods. The Hondurans had a slightly different setup, or it was actually set up below the door so the doors could still open and close. And so in order to replicate that, I had to scratch build it using some really small pieces of round styrene stock here to kind of build up this little frame piece. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a terribly difficult scratch build to do, but just interesting to note that there is that difference. So now we can kind of get ready for painting. We're going to be filling the open cavities of the doors with some foam here, making sure that it's all nice in there. The nice thing about the foam is it's pretty soft. It's not going to break any real details in there. And then we can move on to masking the clear parts. For this I'm using cellophane tape, just like I used on the UH-1D. And remember, if you're going to do this, you need to be using a fresh blade, because you want to be able to cut through that tape without necessarily like gouging into the plastic and without tearing the tape. And if you're using anything but a fresh blade, you're going to have problems. So just make sure you're using a fresh blade. Also be careful. Obviously, you don't want to cut yourself there, but it's just a matter of going around each panel and getting it masked up. For these kind of compound curved panels, I split the tape there a little bit so that I can get it to lay better on the tighter radius of the outside of the window there. So yeah, with that, we're going to move on to priming and painting. I went ahead and primed off camera, and we're going to go ahead and start our painting. Now, I have to apologize in advance here. I mentioned earlier there's some footage missing from this build, and one of them is like the full painting process and the decaling process. So you're going to get kind of a choppy process here, but in reality, if you've watched the Huey build, it's identical to that. So you can translate whatever techniques, paints, colors I'm using in the Huey one, I used on this one as well. So we're starting off getting the fuselage painted in our earth color, getting that all done. Once that dries and cures, we can go over with some blue tack, and we're going to start doing our medium green color. The blue tack, obviously, protecting the areas that I want to keep the earth color. And then we'll, after the medium green, we add more blue tack to cover our medium green, and then we start painting the dark green. So I apologize, I don't have footage of the dark green going on, but again, you can get an idea of what it's like from the Huey video. So now we can paint the rotors up. So for this, we're using a very dark gray. It's very close to black, but the reference images that we had definitely showed that the rotors were not black. We can go ahead and get the tips of the rotors painted. So these were painted like a orangish red color, and I actually have a color that I think is like the perfect match for this. It's called light red. Now this Vallejo light red, when you see it go on, it looks like a fire orange. It's interesting, to say the least. If you're wanting to actually paint red, definitely don't use this color, but if you're wanting like a deep fire orange type of color, this is a great color to use. And yeah, really happy with how those turned out. And at this point, we can get the rocket pods installed. These were painted separately and then installed because technically they are like an olive drab color, which is not the quite same color as the fuselage colors, but it looks pretty close. And then you obviously have like the aluminum color of the fronts and the backs. But I love the Loach. It's a neat little helicopter. Painting the tips of the tail rotor here. Definitely need to upgrade my brush there. It's looking a little ragged. And then we can go ahead and gloss coat everything. So this is going to protect all of our paint work, and it will allow us to do our decals and weathering. So for the decals and weathering, I did pretty much the same thing that I did on the Huey. I had to steal numbers from various sheets to make up the numbers that we needed, and then I hand painted the Honduran flag on the tail, and then just did a quick panel wash with the Ammo MIG dark brown wash for green vehicles. You can see it there on some, like it really kind of picks out some of the rivets on the vehicle, so that's kind of nice. And then we can go ahead and give the whole thing a matte coat. So this seals in all of our decals, seals in all of our weathering, and brings us back down to the final sheen that we want. So now we can go ahead and remove all of our masking. And pretty pleased with how the masking worked. And like I said, I failed to mask over those tiny little windows on the top, so unfortunately those got painted. But the rest of it all turned out pretty nice, and pretty pleased with the masking job that it did, especially because like this helicopter has such a prominent, large, clear canopy that it was important to make sure to get this part right. You can also see the Huey there in the background. I did build these kits simultaneously at the same time, and I had contemplated doing one video for both, but I had enough fun with these. I wanted to kind of give each one their little moment to shine, as it were. And it just really fun to highlight just how tiny this little helicopter is. And it just felt so delicate and fragile handling it. But now we can really just kind of start throwing together all the final pieces. So we get the doors going on. These are just getting super glued on in a semi-open position, which will allow you to still look inside and see all the nice detail that we added. And then we'll go ahead and get the rotor on, and we're going to call it good. So again, the rotor I didn't attach permanently. You can just see there's actually stuck on with a little bit of blue tack. This was again so that it could be shipped off safely and not do a lot of damage. So here we go. Here is our finished AH-1 in Honduran Air Force markings. Had a lot of fun with this little kit. Don't know that I would ever build another one, but it was a fun exercise nonetheless. I do love just how tiny this thing is, and even compared to the Huey, which was not exactly a large kit, this one is about half the size. But anyways, if you've made it through the video, I thank you for sticking around. I appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. If you're not yet a subscriber, I would ask that you consider subscribing. And I try to put out content on a weekly basis. So it alternates between build videos and review videos. Go ahead and hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I really like to interact with you guys and talk with you. Maybe you have tips or tricks that I haven't learned yet, because even though I've been building models for as long as I have, I'm still learning stuff. I'm still trying new products, still trying new techniques, and trying to expand the tool belt that I have for building these scale replicas. Also like to give a huge shout out to my patrons. I appreciate them for supporting the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, consider joining my Patreon, or you can head over to my merch store, buy a shirt or a mug or something. That also helps the channel as well. Regardless, I appreciate you being here, and we will see you on the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye.